Hey, what's happening? What's going on, family? I am here with another installment of Read with Me. And this is actually a retake from this morning. We went through this morning and fooled around and um just being goofy. I think I was asleep. I think that's what happened. But needless to say, we're gonna run through this again. We're not gonna run through it. We're gonna take our time and go through it and give it the time that it deserves, because it is a really uh, pivotal piece of the story. We are about to get back into um, the family story. Last chapter, we read and got into the details with the lineage of Esau and his children, the children that came from him and his wives, who, unlike unlike his father Isaac and unlike his brother Jacob, his wives were from the women who were there in the land of Canaan. He married a Hittite woman, an Egyptian woman, just all of these different people outside of their family, and but also in doing that, I mean, his heart, even concerning that whole thing, his parents very specifically, didn't want them to marry in with the Hittites, and in the very next verse, you see him going to get a wife from the Hittites. So, needless to say, many times you don't understand the reasons that people do the things that they do, and I'm not going to sit here and be an apologist for Esau, but many times we don't understand. We just see the rebellion, but we don't see the other things that played into it. We see the negative side, but we don't see the other things that were a part of it. But what we did see in that previous chapter was, yes, Yahweh is making a people, as he promised Abraham. He's making a people. He's raising up a people um, through a bloodline, and when the scriptures tell us about, Jacob he loved, Esau he hated. And, we're trying to figure out, well, this time they're babies. Like, how is it that he's hating a baby? It's not the baby, it's the way. Like he already knows that these people are not, there's going to be a people that choose a different path, that choose a way. And so the way of those people is the problem, the rebellion, specifically because they don't want me to do this, I'm going to go and do it. That's not the heart he's looking for. And you may say, well, Jacob was a trickster, but when he had an encounter with the Lord, you recall his conversation changed, and the Lord is no longer the God of his fathers. He is the God of their fathers, but he now owns relationship. He now owns covenant with them. And so his, like, the ability of that heart to be changed, that's what the Father's looking for. So anywho, we are now in Genesis 37. So we're not done with genealogy. As we're working through the scriptures, we're going to run into a lot of chapters that get into genealogies. This person was this tribe, this person begot this person. We're going to see that again. I hope that you picked up from the last chapter that it's important to pay attention to names, because some of these people, you're going to see them over again, over and over again. And it's good to know where those people came from, because you will believe that these are people who just came out of nowhere. And it's like, no, actually, just go back. And those kids are the kids of a brother. When we see the Amalekites, if you read last chapter with me, you know where they came from. When we run into the Edomites later on, you're not going to have to wonder where they came from, because you took the time to read the details in Genesis 36. And so you're going to know where those Edomites came from. You'll know these aren't people that just came out of nowhere. No, these were, hey, sat in the same womb with Jacob, but because of the decisions that led them down a path, and in a way, they're not seeking relationship with the God of the Bible, the one true living God. They have gods that they worship. They have things that they worship, but they're not worshiping the same true and living God, and they're not in covenant with Him. So, long story short, that's what happened last time. So, we're going to see some people that we read about as we're going through this. We read about chapters ago, and we saw where these people came into the bloodline, and so we know that and so we're going to see some encounters that occur with the children of Abraham with a different branch of the family, because we're going to keep coming back to the end of the day. It's one family, and it's sibling rivalries. It's family branch against family branch in many instances, in most instances in these situations. So, but we're going to we're going to move. We're going to move forward, and we are going to read with me Genesis 37. We're looking at Joseph, a dreamer and his brothers. And so we're going to look at a couple of stories involving Joseph. And we're going to be reading tonight from the NASB. I think it's the NASB 95. I don't think it's, I think it's the NASB 95. And as you'll see on the spectrum of things, the NASB is closer to the word for word end of the spectrum, not as word for word as the interlinear, not as word for word with that, but somewhere over there, a little more word for word than the Amplified, a little more word for word than the King James Version. But again, this is just an explanation for you of kind of the approach that those different translations take. And so there you go. And then we just to reintroduce the folks that we've been talking about during these chapters that we've been reading. We've been reading about Jacob. Those of you who are studying Hebrew with us, you also know, Yaakov. It's just that name in Hebrew. Nothing fancy, nothing wild, just the Hebrew word. That's all. There's two wives, Leah and Rachel, who are sisters. We know that from previous readings. And then we see the handmaids of those two sister wives, Zilpah and Bilhah. And in today's story, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Joseph. Joseph is the firstborn son of Rachel, but he's on this listing next to last of all of these other children that have been born. And this scripture that we're about to read is going to tell us that Joseph is really special to his dad because he was the child of his old age. But we also know that Joseph is special to him because he is the son of the woman that he really intended to marry when he got connected with this family in the first place. When he connected with his family, his intention was to marry Rachel, and his father, their father, through some shenanigans, ends up having him married to both Leah and Rachel. And in the deal, he also gets the handmaids for those two sisters. And so there you have it. In previous chapters, we've gone through looking at, the meanings of all of their different names. Not really a big deal here, I don't think, or it's not something I'm focusing on for this particular chapter, but I always share that just so you know. One of the reasons that we really do invest time in looking into the Hebrew scriptures, into these Hebrew words in these scriptures, is many times it helps open understanding. It helps us, sometimes when we're trying to make sure that we're reading things in context. But sometimes it helps with clarifying meaning if you look at those things, because in English, we'll have words that, well, those are pretty similar in meaning, and we'll believe that it's talking about the same thing, but we'll look over in the Hebrew, and there will be two distinct words that are used because the nuance is important. What's being said is important. So in English, it will look like there was a repetition, and we'll see that as we go, and I'll point it out when we get to it. But in this lesson, we're going to be looking at, we're going to see quite a bit of input from Reuben, who's the oldest. We're going to see some input from Judah or Yehuda, whose name means praised. And then we're going to be looking at Joseph or Yosef, and let him add, or Yahweh has added, the Lord has added meaning on his name. But here we go. Genesis 37, Joseph's dream. Genesis 37:1 starts as, now Jacob lived in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. These are the records of the generations of Jacob. I'm struggling not to read these in Hebrew. I promise you. I'm trying to read them in English. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. That Hebrew word there is Nashim. You got one wife, you're looking at Isha. But you look at multiple wives, you're looking at Nashim. It says, and Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. And I'm going to pause for just a second because I want to make sure that I remedied the issue that I was having with sound earlier. I see that my microphone is responding, but that means absolutely nothing because we recorded this morning and did the entire story, did the entire video, and had not one drop of sound. So just to be careful, talk amongst yourselves. We'll get back to the reading in just a second. I just don't want to invest time and then have to do it a third time because I will if I have to. I most definitely will do it again in the morning. But we're going to see and just double check and make sure. Okay, here we go. Yes, sound is working. So let's get moving. All right. So, but I didn't check to make sure the privacy was set properly so that people can. This morning, my friend, she wasn't able to comment, um, but I think, it's user error. I never added myself to the studio. And so, since I never added myself to the studio, it never allowed commenting, it never allowed some things. So, let me make sure that we got what we need here. Do I need to do that? No, I do not. And I don't need to add an AI label because we're not using AI. We're not. Okay, so got comments up. If you decide to comment about something, agree, disagree, say amen, call me crazy. It's all good. Use the comment section for that. Okay. So these are the records of the generations of Jacob or Yaakov. Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's Nashim. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Now, Yisrael loved Joseph more than all his sons because he was the son of his old age. And remember, I told you he's also the son of the woman who he really intended to marry when he was looking for a wife. So he's got a couple things going on there that give him favor in his father's eyes. And it says, because of his great love for him, he made him a very colored tunic. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all the brothers. So here's the thing. I believe most parents probably have a favorite child if they have multiple children. You love all of your children, I'm sure, but I'm sure you have a favorite child. I'm sure most parents have a child that is either most like them, a child that is most obedient, child that, and sometimes, it just depends. Having the favorite isn't the problem here. The problem is what happens here in verse 4, which it says his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers. As a result of that, it says they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. And I was looking at that, actually went back and looked at like the pictograph of some of those words that were used there, because I believe that things are translated in the way that they're translated for a reason. I think it's significant. So went back and looked at some of the pictographs, and basically what you get there is kind of, the understanding that it was like, they couldn't help themselves when it came down to being upset with him. You ever had somebody who, when you see them, you just feel a certain kind of way? Well, that's how it was for them with him. And it says in verse 5, then, and we will see that he doesn't do a whole lot to help himself too. We'll say Joseph isn't good at reading the room or the pasture, if you will. It says, then Joseph had a dream or a chalom. And when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, please listen to this dream which I've had. And it's about to go down. It says, for behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf rose up and also stood erect. And behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Then his brothers said to him, are you actually going to reign, Malak, over us? Or are you really going to rule, Mashal, over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Again, those two words there, reign and rule, with us sounds almost interchangeable in an English context. But when you look at the word malak, you are talking about like you think you're going to be king over us. You think you're going to be in charge of us. And then mashal, like you think you're more valuable than us. You think you're more important than we are. Like, and you're the baby on top of that. You're the only one out here with no siblings. All these children by all the other wives. Like, we know daddy loves you, but you think like you're gonna rule over us. You think you're better than us, don't you? So verse 9, now he had still another dream and related it to his brothers and said, lo, I have had still another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. He related it to his father and to his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you to the ground? Now, I'm going to say he had no idea how things were going to go down. And you never really, that's why I'm very careful about disregarding people's callings and that kind of thing, because just because you can't see it today doesn't mean that something won't happen at a later time. And for those who are familiar with the stories, we know that great famine hits the land, and ultimately they will find themselves in a position where they've got to approach him in a very humble way, because he's a representative of the government by the time that they get there. So just because you can't see it for them today doesn't mean that it's not on the road for them. But by the same token, I think Joseph is a cautionary tale for those who do have dreams, who do have a calling. Like, be very mindful when you're sharing with people and they're not receiving what it is that you're sharing. I wouldn't double down in the way that in the way that Joseph has, which is, oh, you were mad because I told you my first dream. Oh, wait, it gets better. I'm gonna have another dream. And guess what? Same thing. Y'all were bowing down to me. And so verse 11 says his brothers were jealous of him, but his father didn't create a jealousy in him. It was just something for the, it says here, but his father kept the saying in mind. Then his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in Shechem. Israel said to Yosef, are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? And we've heard about Shechem. We've talked about Shechem before. Come, and I will send you to them. And he said to him, I will go. Then he said to him, go now and see about the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring word back to me. So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. A man found him, and behold, he was wandering in the field. And the man asked him, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me where they are pasturing the flock. Then the man said, they have moved from here, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. When they saw him from a distance, and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. Now he's going about minding his business. Not really. He's going for minding the assignment that he has, which is to go check on these brothers, see what they're doing, and come back and tell dad. And if I'm not mistaken, we've already had this issue with him reporting back to dad on these brothers. This time, they're not having it. As they see him coming, they see him from afar. This coat the dad has made for him makes him a mark. They're able to see from a distance. As they see him approaching, they begin conspiring, it says here. So they said to one another, here comes this dreamer. So let you know, they've not let go of what he talked about with those dreams. He may have moved on, but there's still that bitterness in their heart. And don't you know, many times you can take cues from how people genuinely feel about you by the things that they remember, the things that they hold on to, the things that, are still simmering there. That's why you have to use discernment and not just assume that just because people see you moving in a way that they're promoting with you, just because people are with you doesn't necessarily mean that they are for you. Just because people said congratulations, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're excited about what they're seeing happening in your life. And so you really, I'm not saying be suspicious of everybody, but what I am saying is be mindful, use discernment so that you're not building your hopes on someone that's really not for you. Okay. Someone who's not as excited about where they see you going and what they see happening in your life. And but we'll invest into those trying to convince people to believe in us, to convince people to support us, when in fact your assignment is to just do your assignment however they feel about it. His assignment was go check on them and then go back and see about dad. But what he doesn't know is they've already laid a plan for him. So verse 20 says, now then, come and let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits, and we will say a wild beast devoured him. Then let us see what will become of his dreams. But Reuben heard this and rescued him out of their hands and said, let us not take his life. Reuben further said to them, shed no blood. Throw him into this pit that is in the wilderness, but do not lay hands on him, that he might rescue him out of their hands to restore him to his father. So it came about when Joseph reached his brothers that they stripped Joseph of his tunic, the vari-colored tunic that was on him, and they took him and threw him into the pit. Now the pit was empty without any water in it. And some time ago, I did just a little studying and researching on cisterns, which are those big pits that they used to hold water. You know, they didn't have running water at that time, so they would have these reservoirs that they would dig, and that would be the place where they would store up rainwater to use, you know, for the animals, for the crops, whatever the case may be. So verse 25 says, but those cisterns, but I found out something really interesting. Did you know that we have cisterns in our brains? Those spaces where fluid that protects your brain from moving around, that cushions your brain, those areas where that fluid sits are called cisterns. Verse 25, that's just extra nerd stuff. Pay me no mind. Verse 25, then they sat down to eat a meal, and as they raised their eyes and looked, behold, a caravan of Ishmaelites was coming from Gilead with their camels bearing aromatic gum and balm and myrrh on their way to bring them down to Egypt. So Ishmaelites, well, we've talked about Ishmael before, so that's why I said we can't, don't just skip over names and people. Those things become important. Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it for us to kill our brother and cover up his blood? So again, another one realizes like it doesn't make sense for us to kill him. We don't have to kill him. We just need this dude to quit telling us these dreams. You know, we just need to get him out of our face, out of our way, and out of our business. So he suggests, come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then some Midianite traders passed by. So they pulled him up and lifted Joseph out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. Thus, they, the Ishmaelites, brought Joseph into Egypt. It's interesting that they didn't just put him in their hands, but they actually sold him and profited from it, which makes it even more interesting that what brings those brothers back to Joseph is going to be lack, going to be the great famine that hits the land that causes them to have to come and have an encounter with him later on, and that he uses coins he leaves coins in their bag as the reason that they're going, as one of the compelling reasons that they're going to have to come back to him. Really, really interesting. But okay, we'll journey on. Has nothing to do with anything. Just me and my overthinking. So verse 29. Now Reuben returned to the pit, and behold. Now again, remember Reuben's the oldest brother. Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. So he tore his garments. He returned to his brothers and said, the boy is not there. As for me, where am I to go? So they took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat and dipped the tunic in the blood. And they sent the varicolored tunic and brought it to their father and said, "We found this. Please examine it to see whether it is your son's tunic or not." And it's interesting, again, the tactics that they use, knowing that their dad's name is trickster or supplanter. And so it's not surprising that his children are continuing to operate in that manner. Back when we covered the chapter on Dinah, them being very supplanterish, very trickerish in their behaviors, in convincing the men of Shechem to become circumcised. And while they were weak and recovering from their circumcision, they had took victory over them and killed all of them because of what the prince there in Shechem had done in defiling Dinah. And so these are some tricky young men as well. So they convinced their dad that they just found this tunic with his blood on it. Then he examined it and said, "It is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." So they don't have to finish out. They're doing what many people say. Well, we didn't lie. He just came to his own conclusions about what happened. No, you led him in a direction. You manipulated him into a thought, into a place, and covered what you had actually done, which was sold his son into servantry, um, knowing full well. Sorry, I got distracted by something that was happening on the TV. Forgive me. So Jacob tore his clothes, similar to what we saw Reuben do, in that culture, that sign of mourning and anguish, and just that outward sign of what was going on inside. It says, and he put a sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days because he thinks he's dead, right? Verse 35, then all his sons and all his daughters arose to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "Surely I will go down to Sheol in mourning for my son." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, Paro's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. So as we move forward, we're later going to come back into the story of how things play out for Joseph. But remember, these were Ishmaelites who um, these were Ishmaelites that they sold him to. And then here they're getting even more specific. Meanwhile, these Midianites sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, the captain of the bodyguard. And so there's even more specific information about who it is that um, is responsible for carrying Joseph to Egypt, which we're going to see later how the Lord uses him to preserve the very family that didn't see any value in him, how the Lord uses situations in that town to cause him to be elevated and allows him to actually walk out those dreams that he had, those very dreams that caused them to despise him, that caused him to, end up in that pit, that caused him to be sold to the Ishmaelites, that caused him to then be sold into Egypt. Um, and so it helps us with understanding why later on he's even able to say, "What you intended for evil, God will make it good." And so I know a lot of times we will say those things, but it's important to understand like the biblical perspective on why those things were being said. This man went through great, like a lot of times we'll put it on pettiness. Somebody was trying to get me, but you know what? No, there were life and death situations many times around these things that we use as cliches. Like somebody's life was on the line. His brothers were legitimately planning to murder him, um, and then thought better of murdering him, but then still convinced their father that he had been killed by a wild animal, when in fact they had sold him into a slavery. And so there was a very grievous evil done to him. But how many of you know that if you endure the difficulties, and through those difficulties, you're able to see the hand of God in everything that you're doing, and you're able to see how you end up positioned to be a benefit and a blessing to the world, to be the solution to a problem, it helps you it many times it will help you with processing the trauma that you dealt with, the slight that you dealt with, the backstabbing or front stabbing that you dealt with. If we will be mindful to allow the Lord to use the things that we've been through, rather than sink into a depressive, why me? Oh no, how am I going to make it through this? Why is this happening to me? Those difficulties and those tough situations that we encounter in life, many times, if we'll just stop and take a moment and say, Lord, I don't blame you for doing this thing, this difficult thing, because it's not your nature to cause me to be this thing, or to cause this trauma that happened to me, or to cause this person to do or say what it is that they said or did that damaged me. You didn't cause them to do that. You didn't ordain them to do that. Nevertheless, the will of man, the decisions of man, resulted in me being in a very bad situation. But now, on the other side of that bad situation, I can see that, Lord, there even in the bad things that happen to me, you can use those things to properly position me for purpose, to properly position me for my future. But what the enemy, an unregenerated mindset would have you do would be to dwell on those traumas and those things, that those moments when you were betrayed, those moments when people didn't live up to your expectations, the moments when people did the same things that they did to Yeshua, rejected him, denied him, betrayed him, crucified him, all of those things that he experienced. In a regular person could very well set up a root of bitterness. And many times, those are the reasons that it's difficult for us to heal, because it's hard to get past the why did this person do this, or why me. Sometimes it can be so difficult to get past that moment. But I know for myself that through prayer, through the healing work of the Holy Spirit, that you're able to get past those moments, so that you're able to get to the place where, you know what, Lord, I don't even have to understand why this thing happened. All I have to do is sit back and see how you moved in this situation. Like we're going to see with Joseph. I can't understand why my brothers hated me. I just simply shared with them the dream that you gave me. I can't understand why people don't support me. I don't understand why mama left or daddy left. I don't understand why I was in this situation or in that situation. But when I sit back and think about it after I'm no longer in harm's way, I don't have to allow the thing that I experienced to wreck my mind and pervert my heart, because now I can see that that difficulty that I endured, it positioned me to be able to handle the place that you had for me. It positioned me to be able to do the work that it is that you've called for me to do. As a result of what I've experienced, I can now be a witness to somebody else that you can make it. It doesn't have to tear you down. It doesn't have to break you. It doesn't have to ruin your life. Even in what you went through, there is still something that the Lord is able to use and allow you to ultimately end up helping someone else go through what it is that they're having to go through. And so we're going to see Joseph's story a little bit later on. And I'm probably going to spend a little more time looking into this, because I know that there are some things to study out. We're just reading right now. We're just reading and looking and seeing what the text gives us. But my goal is always to encourage you to spend time studying some things out. What is Jacob talking about when he talks about going down to Sheol and mourning? Looking even at like the people involved in this story. We talked about Ishmaelites. Do you recall when we read that chapters ago about Ishmael? Um, Here, Midianites. We looked at this previously before. Remember the Midianites, Midian. They're the sons of Abraham by Keturah. So, like, there's so much to study out. There's so much to spend time and just dig into the word of the Father. It is definitely alive and powerful, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit, joint and marrow, discerner of the thoughts and intentions of the hearts of man. Like, there's so much in the word that we can, if we'll invest the time and the energy to go in and just mine it and find those nuggets that can help us, and that will feed us and nourish us, and really many times help us deal with those difficult things that, I've talked to therapists, I've talked to people, I've talked to family, I've talked to friends, and I just can't reconcile with it. But when I see how the Lord worked in Joseph's story, or I see how the Lord worked in David's story, black sheep, outcast, everybody, prophet comes to town to anoint a king. They sent everybody but me. Little did they know, while I was out here in the fields working with daddy sheep, fighting off bears, fighting off wild animals, learning how to defeat giants, that the Lord was preparing me for an actual battle with an actual giant. That while I was out here learning how to serve, He was crafting my heart to be a king, you know. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. But and you can develop your own. And so my goal is always to provoke you to further study, reading further. We only do a chapter at a time. Sometimes, depending on if it's longer than that, we'll do a little more. We'll do a little less. If it's short, we'll do a little more. But ultimately, the assignment that I have is to read through these scriptures and encourage you to invest time in making sure that you're understanding, because we can talk about a lot of things and we can spend a lot of time doing a lot of things. I'm guilty. I can pick up my phone. We talked about it in one of our Bible study groups tonight. I can pick up my phone and start looking at things, and before you know it, an hour has gone, hour and a half is gone, a great chunk of time is gone, and all I was doing was sitting there scrolling. And it's like, yeah, we have time to pursue the things that we're really interested in. And we also find time to waste. So take some time. I want to encourage you. My hope is that in the morning we'll pick up with Genesis 38, where we will read about Judah and Tamar. We saw a little bit about Judah here today, but we'll look a little further at the at Joseph's brother Judah before we start moving into what happens with Joseph in Egypt. Judah and Tamar is an interesting story. It's one of those side stories that is interesting because of the people that are produced, of course, and the people that are involved, of course. But I tell everybody, if you're looking at intrigue, I know reality TV has some intriguing things that are happening, but the scriptures are so full of interesting things. And so I want to encourage you, if you're not familiar with the story of Judah and Tamar, that you join us tomorrow morning. Should should the Lord tarry, as the old folks say, and we are still here in the morning, we'll look at Genesis 38, Judah and Tamar. But for tonight, thank you for those who stopped by, passed by, um, or stopped for a while. I thank the Lord for your time, your support. Share it. I've actually started saving them over on YouTube, where they can be watched without having to get on Facebook. I know a lot of people do fasts and they're not even on Facebook, and so we started storing the videos over on YouTube, where they can be kept and you can review them at a later time. And again, I don't believe that conflict is all bad. And so if you disagree with anything that I've said, I'm a big girl. I'm also wise enough to know that I don't know everything. Um, but I'm just here offering my perspective. If you have a different perspective, different understanding, we're not gonna have private interpretations, because the word says what it says and it means what it means. But there may be a different perspective or a different way that you see some things, and we can talk those out. Not in this space though. This space we're just reading, but um, conflict and dialogue I think is best handled face to face. So you can inbox me or email me, and we can have conversation offline. Otherwise, I want you to have a good night. Get some good rest. Unless, of course, you're one of the people who checks out my videos and you're on your way to work. or you're already at work. I pray that you have a peaceful night, that there's no disturbances, no issues, that you're able to produce what it is that you need to produce, take care of what it is that you need to take care of, and in the morning, get ready to go home. And on your way home in the morning, tune in. We'll be on probably, goal is always between 7:30 and 7:45 to jump on, do the quick reading, speak a little bit, pray about our day, and there we go. We're done. So thank you for joining me tonight. And if the Lord permits, I'll see you tomorrow where we will be reading about Judah and Tamar. So have a wonderful night. Talk to you later. Bye. Bye.